and welcome. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and turn to number 354 in the gray hymnal, We Laugh, We Cry. Number 354. Let us join together in singing.
And we feel a special glow. We see time's endless journey as we watch the baby grow. We thrill to hear imagination freely running wild. We dedicate our minds and hearts to the spirit of this child, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a time to be together, and with the grace of age we share the wonder of youth, and we believe that growing is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories we share with friends, they will linger on, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow. We have the gift to believe that peace within our living is an answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together here to make sense of what we find. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found our joy being together.
Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor, Michigan. We are a community who has been an active, liberal religious voice in Southeast Michigan since 1865. We are a community who supports one another through our spiritual and ethical journey. We are a community seeking to make this world a more just and equitable place for all living in it. I am Carter Smith, and I have the pleasure of serving this congregation as the acting director of Music Ministries. We are joined this morning in worship by Reverend Manish Mishra-Marzetti, our senior minister, the members of our wonderful AV team who are helping make this service available and accessible to our online and physical community. And someone who may be a familiar face to some of you, our former music director, pianist, and organist to our congregation, Sarah Albright. Who is accompanying our service this morning. And later we'll hear from Leslie McGraw, a representative from the ICPJ, who will tell us a little about the important work that organization is doing. And all of you, whether you are joining us physically in this space or virtually through our live stream, thank you for trusting us with your time and presence this morning. If you are new to this congregation and you would like to learn more about our community, please join us for a newcomer welcome directly following the service in the Jackson Chapel, which is located just past the social hall on your right as you exit through these double doors. There you'll have a chance to meet staff and other congregants and get more deeply connected with our community. If you are joining us virtually this morning, we hope that you will take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat so that we can greet you. We also encourage you to visit our website and take our newcomer survey, which can be found at UUAA.org/newcomer survey. This will help us stay in touch with you and share information about upcoming events and services. If you are a young one, SGD aged, we want to let you know that our children are beginning with their programming to start the service this morning, and we welcome you to join them down the hall in the SGD wing. This morning we're going to engage in a question box service in which Reverend Manish will randomly select questions that will be submitted by all of you joining us this morning. I can honestly say that I don't envy Reverend Manish right now. In fact, I'm not sure I can think of something that may elicit more anxiety than having to step into his shoes right now. But that being said, I am thrilled that all of you are joining us this morning. This is one of my favorite services that we do here at UUAA. I love hearing the spiritual and ethical wonderings of our community, and I marvel at Reverend Manish's ability to sort through and answer right on the spot. A little later, you'll have an opportunity to write down questions, either here in person or online, that Reverend Manish will randomly select from. So be thinking of your best question as we approach that moment in our time together. And now I invite you to find a space of calm as we move more deeply into our time together. We are gathered for worship.
Good morning. Thank you, Carter, for that warm introduction into our Sunday service today. Each Sunday all across North America and even the world, congregations like ours gather together and begin their time by lighting a flame, lighting our chalice. In just a moment, Phyllis Valentine will help us light our chalice this morning, and I invite Phyllis to join us in the chancel. Each of us gets to decide what this flame might mean to us and what its significance might mean. I offer often that it can represent the flame of love, compassion, and caring that is alive in our hearts, that we seek to bring alive more fully together in community. It can represent the spark of wisdom that we seek to be guided by and live into more fully and more deeply. Whatever it may be for you, I invite you to take just a moment to center and ground yourself in that as we join together in saying our familiar words of chalice lighting. Would you join your hearts as well as your voices as we say together, "We light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace." Thank you, Phyllis. We are also a community that is not bound together by mandatory or required beliefs that we must all subscribe to, particular creeds or notions that we expect to be uniformly held amongst us. Rather, we are a community guided and grounded in ethics and love and caring for one another, which is itself an ethical commitment. We express this each Sunday to one another as the promises we make to one another in community. We refer to this as our covenant. I'd invite you to join your hearts and your voices once again as we offer to one another these words of covenant. The spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth in love, and to help one another. May it always be so. As Carter shared, this morning is one of our 2 question box services that we do in a year. We're moving into doing one in the summer and then one during our regular congregational year. If you are newer to us, this may seem like an odd tradition to kind of engage in. If you're used to wisdom just coming from the front and being shared with you and you just show up and receive it, this is a co-created Sunday. And I want to take just a moment to share how we can most productively engage in that co-creation, both those of our attendees that are online and those gathered here in our sanctuary in person this morning. You get to ask on a slip of paper that you received here in person. Online, you can put a question in the chat, but just wait a moment, don't do it quite yet. You get to ask a question that is genuinely on your heart, on your mind, in your soul, one that you may be wrestling with in the times we're in, this current context we're in. What does it mean to be human now, today, for you? This is a rare opportunity to be in direct dialogue with me and with the whole community around these wonderings. And I promise you, if you have a deep longing or spiritual wondering, something that you've been wrestling with, there are almost always other people in our community who are holding a similar longing, wondering, or need. So don't be shy about looking deeply within and sharing what that might be for you. Any professionally appropriate questions are allowed, and I've never had to disallow a question on that grounds, but it's worth just saying that. We do ask you to include your name and your contact information as you submit a question, and that allows us for individual follow-up on anything that may be needed. I personally read every question that is submitted, regardless of whether we're able to get to them on a particular Sunday morning. And a typical Sunday morning, we get through about 4 or 5 questions that have been submitted. 5 is really lucky. We move through them well, quickly and well. 4 is probably more typical, but just to help you have the set of expectations of what's possible. But I personally read everything that's submitted, and it informs future ongoing planning for our Sunday services, the types of topics we might choose and focus on in the months ahead. If you're online, we invite you to take just a moment, ground yourself in all of that and that intention and what may be in your heart on this day. Anytime in the next, let's say, handful of minutes, as the folks here who gathered in person are submitting their questions, we invite you to submit your questions into the chat. If you're here in person with us and you did not receive a half slip of paper that looks a little bit like this, which is a form on which you can submit your questions, please raise your hand. And in addition, if you need a writing implement, a pencil, our ushers will bring you either a form or a pencil. If you just raise your hands, they'll help you with that. For now, we're going to enter into a time of reflective music, contemplative music, as we give you some space to write down one question. I know some of us like to do the multi-part with the 3 or 4 bullets underneath. It gets really complicated. If you could, just one question is lovely. Take a moment to think of one question, and please help me with your handwriting too. I'm at an age where deciphering is not always the easiest thing to do. But we'll take just a moment now. Thank you, Sarah. As we continue in that contemplative mood, I'd invite you, if you've completed your question, just fold it in half and send it to the aisles. The ushers will come down the center aisles and collect the questions. We thank you for participating. If you're still writing and needed a few extra moments, please you can hand a question to an usher in the next minute or two as well. Thank you.
Once a month, we have the privilege to hear from an organization that our community has partnered with to do the important social justice work needed in the Ann Arbor area. This month, that group is the Interfaith Council for Peace and Justice, or as it is more commonly known, ICPJ. I am very happy to welcome Leslie McGraw, who serves on the board of ICPJ, to our pulpit this morning to tell us more about the organization's important work. Would you please join with me in welcoming Leslie this morning?
Thank you. Good morning. I would like to bring greetings to Reverend Manish and the staff at the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation and to all of you gathered here today. I bring you greetings on behalf of one of your justice partners, the Interfaith Council for Peace and Justice of Washtenaw County. I'm also here as a servant leader who is always aiming towards the mark of justice. Our shared survival rests on our ability to secure adequate housing and basic needs and common sense, people-centered civic engagement for everyone. Like the opposite of bougie civics, right? Including our most vulnerable neighbors. UUAA has generously supported ICPJ's activism through the Jackson Social Welfare Fund, specifically program related to building community power and practicing democracy. In 2023 and 2024, we want to, along with our justice partners, take on one of the greatest threats to insecurity for Washtenaw County residents, which is housing. So, did you know that 25% of our young registered voters who did not vote in the last major election cited address-related issues as a reason for not voting? ICPJ centers racial and economic justice as we address the root causes of violence from oppression, poverty, environmental devastation, patriarchy, and war. We wage love and practice nonviolence in all its forms through education, community organizing, advocacy, and direct action. My primary role with ICPJ over the last year and a half has been on the Vote Caucus. To get out the vote is not only our end goal with the Vote Caucus, but also as an acronym which stands for Voters Organizing Through Engagement. We cannot continue to expect our most vulnerable neighbors to be engaged and empowered and to vote on Election Day while they do not have security in their most basic needs. In Isaiah 58:7, we're given a call to action to bring the homeless poor into the house, and that's what we intend to do. There's an old saying I used to hear from the elders in my church and in my family from West Tennessee. Your life may be the only Bible some people may ever read. You may be the only Jesus some people see. After today's service, please see me or Cecil so that we may collect names and emails so that you'll be informed of important dates and points of action that can help you get involved in this important work. And later, after today, we'll have brochures here on site. So, thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. We're delighted to have you with us this morning, and we're delighted that the ICPJ, the Interfaith Council of Peace and Justice, is a critical justice partner for our community. All of the good work that we engage in week after week of building and supporting this community, of showing up in a spirit of caring and support for one another, all of our justice activities, all of the work that we're able to empower in our local region and beyond is made possible through your generous financial contributions. Our community is completely self-funded. There are no external grants that we receive from our denomination. It's rather the other way around. Our denominational structures exist because we choose to support them. In that spirit of recognizing that all that we do is built together through our collective generosity, we invite you to give as generously as you're able to this morning's offering. In just a moment, the ushers will come around with baskets for cash or check donations. If you'd like to give electronically, you may do so by going to UUAA.org/giving, or you can text UUAA to 73256, and be sure to select the weekly offering as the recipient for your generous financial contributions. This morning's offering will now be gratefully received.
Flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far of him that hails a new creation. Tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars, I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? My life flows on in endless song. How can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love prevails o'er heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing?
What a gorgeous rendition of that piece, Carter. Thank you, truly. I invite our ushers to come forward, and as they do, I invite you, those gathered in person, to rise in body or spirit as you're comfortably able as we engage in our dedication of this morning's offering. If you join your hearts and your voices as we say together our familiar words of dedication. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay. We now enter our question portion of this morning's service. I never know what to expect. I know I can count on our community. We come up with very thoughtful questions. That I do know I can rely on. Okay, so how do you love and show love when your heart is barren? So I'm holding the ache of that, the wording of this question for just a second. Barren. So barren, the word barren tells me that the individual holding this, wondering this, pondering this, there's a loneliness or a heartbrokenness, something that they're navigating. And because of that, they're feeling there's a barrier or a stumbling block to living more deeply into the spirit of love. And that's not surprising for those of us who have navigated grief or loneliness or heartbrokenness, pain, suffering. We have to tend to that. We have to tend to that harder experience first. It's the first thing we must pay attention to. And sometimes we're not able to navigate the needs of that complexity on our own. Even those of us in helping professions, we have our own spiritual teachers, therapists, coaches, spiritual directors that we work with when we're experiencing heartache or loneliness or brokenheartedness. We also need that support. So what I would advise is, I don't know because all I have is the one sentence, but I'm hoping and deeply praying in my heart that the individual holding this question, that you are finding the support you need to attend to that barrenness that you've offered in this question. Because only by directly attending to that, working with it, finding your way through whatever that experience is that is creating this sense of barrenness, can we arrive at a renewed sense of open-heartedness. And that open-heartedness is actually essential to being able to feel joy again. Often when we're in that place of brokenheartedness or pain or barrenness, joy feels like a distant memory. What was joy? When did I last feel joy? You deserve it. Each of us does. We're not here to simply suffer the challenges of being human. We're here also to appreciate the beauty, the intense beauty of what it means to be human. And yes, that beauty, the flip side of it, as we love, we feel loss. As we care, we feel disappointment. They're flip sides of the same coin. These experiences go hand in hand. And when we're in the midst of that barrenness, that brokenheartedness, we must first work deeply with that so that we can flip the coin and get back to the open-heartedness which is in our innate state of being, and that open-heartedness allows us to experience the joy and beauty of life again. Thank you. That's such a deep question to be pulling out as the very first question today, but I appreciate the trust and I appreciate the honesty of that question very much. Yeah, this is a question of our time. Okay, so how do you reconcile when a loved one isn't as open as you are, as accepting of other people as you are? This is the question of our time. I say that because this gets to difference, right? It gets to the experience of encountering others, friends, family members, extended family members, family of choice, community members who approach human difference differently than I might individually or you might individually. Now, what we're seeing in the culture around us is an ever narrowing of the circles of who we're willing to even interact with. And I use the word willing intentionally, because the willingness is disappearing. And as the willingness disappears, who we actually encounter, who we're willing to engage deeply with, gets narrower and narrower and narrower levels of like-mindedness, to the point where across our society, we're mostly hearing echo chambers of folks who typically or mostly agree with us, and difference of any kind, difference of opinion, perspective, life experience, personal need, is then discarded. That other perspective has no value. It's not relevant to me. Or, this is the other version of it we get, it's offensive to me. And it might be. Denigrating other people, other human beings, who they are, their life experiences, their journeys, that's not acceptable to me. But denigrating other people is not the same thing as simply having a difference of perspective or life experience. And in that, I think at times, confusion about whether we're encountering denigration or simply a difference of opinion, I think we're conflating the two at times and shutting out simple, genuine differences of personal perspective, life experience, and need. Denigration is not necessary. In fact, we can be quite loving. We can be very caring in the ways in which we show up embodying difference of opinion, need, or experience. In fact, I encourage us to. That's one of the consistent things I offer in my leadership from this pulpit, is that there's no reason why we can't be lovingly and deeply present to one another across difference. It's a choice. It's a commitment. It's not necessarily easy. It is sometimes hard, quite hard to do. Because the easier thing is to feel really upset that, oh, somebody else holds a totally different understanding of what it means to be human in this time. Yeah, but that's always been true. What's newer is the way in which we're discarding people because of it. I grew up in a time where that was not the norm. And for anybody here who's my age or older, you remember those days when we did not discard people simply because they had an honest difference of perspective, life experience, or individual need. And yet the discarding has become normalized. Not just that, the ostracization, the moving away from, the lack of willingness to hold others in your heart across difference. So you've asked a profound question here. Another we always have such very good questions in our community on these Sundays. The question here was reconciliation. It was about, the word is reconcile. How do you reconcile when somebody you love and care about isn't as accepting of others as you are? The word reconcile is the right word. It's the right word. They're not asking what to do about it, but how to reconcile it within themselves. And that's exactly the right frame of mind. So one, I think that what I encounter around this in our society, in our culture, is the aggression, and in Buddhism this is called aggression. This is absolutely aggression. The aggression of wanting to change the other person and get them to think just like I do or you do. That's the go-to these days. And that often occurs with yelling or online, all capital letters being posted on somebody's page or whatever it might be. The simply talking is gentler than yelling. We often yell and get really aggressive and in one another's faces around around difference. But even talking at somebody, which doesn't necessarily need to require yelling or all capital letters, it's merely a talking at. It doesn't change the other person. They know you're trying to be aggressive, that you're discarding who they are, what their experience is, what their needs are, what their perspective is. And they're less likely to do the thing that you want, which is agree with you, because of the aggression which they can feel in the interchange. So yelling at somebody and talking at somebody accomplishes nothing. In fact, it's usually steps backwards because now there's damage in that relationship as well, because they've correctly picked up on the aggression. So don't do those things. They don't work. I promise you they don't work. There's no need to talk at somebody or yell at somebody because of a difference of perspective, need, or life experience. So one, the reconciliation, which is the beauty of how this question is phrased, is arriving at that internally. I cannot change another human being. I cannot force, I'm using the word force intentionally, I cannot force another human being to grow around their learning edges or needs, even though I may be able to see that personal growth is needed. I have no volition or agency to force anybody to grow. So yes, those are the first things to reconcile. I cannot change another human being. I cannot force another human being to learn a thing that they are not ready to learn. Make peace with that, because that is the reality. That is the reality. That's what we must reconcile. From that place of reconciliation, again, I've said unambiguously, I don't believe in denigrating other human beings. So is your loved one, are they denigrating? Are they acting harmful in our broader society or in your family or in your friend circle, saying things that are actually hurting people's feelings? If so, that might be a situation you might not want to be in. You might choose for more distance in that relationship. But if it's simply an honest difference of opinion, deeply held, lovingly expressed, yeah, maybe we just accept that for the time being. Maybe we just lovingly, the emphasis is on the caring part and the loving part, lovingly and clearly state, I hear you, I understand where you're at, but this is what my experience is around this issue, this set of needs in the world. My experience is very different than yours. I see that, I appreciate that, but I just want to share what mine is. And then we leave it at that. Nothing else is required, because there's no forcing another human being to change before they're ready, before they themselves want to. I hope that offers a little bit of perspective. Both these questions so far today, I really love the thoughtfulness around how they're being expressed, because in a way the answers in the language that these two questions we've had so far have been offered in. I wanted to be able to take a question from online, from our chat. Thank you, Carter. Got it. Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah, oh my God, these are such good questions today. Climate change is terrifying and truly changing our lives, absolutely. What do you do, meaning I suppose, do to cope with climate worries, my own and my children's, and what should we all be doing to stop global warming? You should ask me to just solve the whole thing while we're at it. 2,000 years of human living and existence. Okay, first part first. Oh, this is a big one. So I've been in circles, this is over 5 to 8 years, so not just here in our community, elsewhere, other communities where I've been. I've been in circles where I'm often with folks who are older than me, and this topic will come up, and I'll ask, so because I'm from a culture where we really respect elders, those who are older than us. We're taught from a young age. People have life experience. You honor that wisdom. And so I often ask this question when I'm in circles of elders, people older than me, and the question comes up, what are you saying to your children, your grandchildren? And often it's the grandchildren is the relevant frame. What are you saying to your grandchildren about the world they're going to inherit 20 years from now, because we're not changing enough? And so there's a trajectory we're on. It's obvious. I mean, the trajectory of climate devastation, it's unfolding quicker than any of us could ever have imagined, and this is just the beginning. Imagine this trajectory unchanged for another 20 years. The world that my children, and for many of you, your grandchildren are going to be living in, will look nothing at all like what the world has looked like in earlier decades. Vast swaths of the planet potentially uninhabitable. We think we have a migration crisis now? Give it another 10, 20 years. And think of the logic, what will flow from that? The scarcity of places that are livable, the massive need of human migration to places that are arid and have fresh water. By the way, we're one of those places that could likely last longer than others. There's going to be conflict, likely war, likely destruction. I mean, right? So it doesn't take a lot to think through what are the logical things of this trajectory that we're headed on. I live with tremendous heartache that this is the future we're bequeathing our children. Tremendous heartache. And I move in local communities, theater-based communities, where I often interact with folks in their 20s in the local theater communities. And I'll say to them, there's a significant age difference between me and you. You're going to be around much longer than me, and what do you think about all that? And literally, I get very similar answers. What I hear is, we're effed. And what are you expecting us to do about it when all of you who are older than us haven't been willing to change enough? Why are you thinking the grandchildren are going to solve this thing when we haven't been willing and able to solve this thing? And by the time those grandchildren are in power and in control of anything, that's 30 years from now. This trajectory is awful already, and in 20 or 30 years, there's nothing left to solve. It's just living into it at that point in time. So I hold the worry and the fear and the anxiety and the pain that's expressed in this question. I would hazard to say most Unitarian Universalists do. We are a people who have always faced reality as it is, the needs of our culture and society, plainly and courageously. We've never been afraid of looking at things clearly. So I trust that about us. And yet, here's the last part of this question: what should we all be doing to stop global warming? You need a PhD dissertation and a degree, a PhD degree just in that topic alone, but I'd hazard to say, if we look at much of the systems of human organization that we have created, they directly support the problems that we're in the midst of. They have allowed human hoarding. They have allowed greed. They have allowed plenitude for some and massive suffering for others. Are we expecting that that'll magically change? I mean, it should, it deserves to change, and I think we as a people of faith, of ethical commitment, we aspire toward and support changes even if they are massive. Why not? This is aspirational work that we do together in spiritual community like this. We should be able to aspire towards the massive changes that are required. Oh, but then come the hard parts. What must each of us sacrifice in order to live into a radically differently structured human society than the one that has directly created all these problems? That I leave for your individual discernment, because there's no changing any of this without very significant sacrifice. Now, the hard part is and I'm not saying anything we don't know. We know this, right? We know this. Then that knowing of it will take massive sacrifice on the part of each and every one of us to live into something different, runs smack up against, but I'm also navigating pain. I'm also navigating hardship. Who says my life is perfect and I'm bathed in plenitude, right? So internally we go through this tug of war of my life isn't perfect. I'm not living with billions in the bank account. And yet it will take all of us to sacrifice. And if we don't, and we aren't making enough sacrifices. That's just the plain truth of it. We aren't. It is our children and grandchildren who are going to suffer. And then at the point they do, there's no choice. There'll be no choice around the suffering and no choice around the sacrifices. So what I often invite, where this kind of came up for me is when I'm with folks I consider elders, I often ask this question too. I say, what are you saying to your grandchildren? And I often hear we're not having those conversations because they're not fun. And we want our grandchildren to be able to have fun and enjoy their childhood and their youth. And here's the flip side of that. I promise you they know what's going on. They absolutely know what's going on. So it is far better for us to be courageous and bold and talk to them with love and honesty about what the needs of our time are than to avoid the topic. So I hold that little bit of a prayer too. Please let's not avoid the topic with our younger ones. They need our support, they need our encouragement. And there's a lot of good things we can do, even if we're unable to change this larger trajectory that we're on as a human species. I believe we can. I know we're trying to. It's very incremental. It needs to be a sharper shift than we're able to do right now. But even if we're not able to change that trajectory sharp enough, there are things that will endure in whatever that world is our kids and grandkids will inherit. Teachings endure. Stories endure. Songs endure. Make sure your loved ones, your little ones, are hearing the right teachings, that they're learning it's not all about hoarding, achieving the most, keeping the most for oneself, but it's about interdependence, our own human interdependence with one another and with our planet. Talk to them about these things, teach them these things. Some things will endure, whatever 50 years from now looks like, and it's usually teachings, stories, and songs. So there is something we can do, even if we can't change the entire trajectory of the human species. Such a good question. Such a good question. Okay, this is the very first piece of paper on the top. Let's see what it's about. Oh my. I never remember to bring my reading glasses. I need to start doing that. If 2024 becomes the last free y'all aren't asking easy things today. If 2024 becomes the last free election in the United States, what should we do now? Okay, it goes on. It's a little long, but that's the main question. But to protect vulnerable members and religious freedom, oh wow, do we need to prepare an underground? Wow. Oh my goodness, oh wow. Whew. Okay. I think about this a lot. I don't preach about it a lot. And I mean, I see, you just look at the previous question about climate change, right? It's hard to preach about that topic, climate change, without facing the brutal realities of where we are. And then what's the optimism? Like, we use love the possibilities. We want to know at the end of a worship service, like, what's the sense of possibility you're leaving me with? Well, I'd be lying to you if I said there's an easy solution to climate change, much less, as this question implied a little bit in its wording, that I'm going to somehow help make it happen, help resolve the problem. It's not that simple. And it's similarly true, so this is all connected. This is all connected. I want to invite us to notice how all of this is connected. We human beings have created systems of society, of civil society, and within that culture, that have directly contributed to our this messed up relationship that we have with our planet and our environment. It is a system of domination. We dominate the planet. It is there for us to use as opposed to be in relationship with. Use and relationship are not the same thing. Our civic structures have enabled all of this. So our civic political structures are not separate from the problems that we're encountering that we don't know how to resolve because the structures were never designed to be equitable and relationship-based structures. They were domination and control-based structures, mitigating or managing control and domination, as opposed to furthering interdependence and relationship. So it's all connected. These are not separate realities. They're absolutely the same. So we're seeing the same in our political processes. When some don't get their way, they'll call the whole thing illegitimate. None of it works. Well, I would agree with it that none of it's really working. But it's a self-interested declaration of it's not working when we're not getting our way. So when we're getting our way, it works great. When we're not getting our way, it's a problem. And the whole thing should be redesigned. And this is how we're teetering back and forth with 49% of society and 51% of society, with 2% deciding the outcomes of any given election cycle. This is unprecedented in the history of our nation. If this isn't telling us that these political structures are no longer working for the needs of our time, I don't know what will. But that's the truth of it, that they're not really working. Now, even when, I know many Unitarian Universalists identify as politically progressive. That's not uniformly true, but many of us do. But let's just take that majority perspective of Unitarian Universalism, that it's politically progressive as well as religiously, ethically progressive. When we're in that 51%, it is so easy to forget that 48%, 49% did not vote for the thing that we are cheering on. That they may be grieving or anxious or scared. That there are genuine life experiences and needs that group is feeling are being unrecognized. So it circles back around to the very first or second question we had about the complex dynamics of relationship of this time that we're in. We are discarding people. And so the fraughtness of our political processes reflects that as well. The only way to bridge it is through relationship and deeper understanding. Okay, so back to this, I think it's quite possible, if not the upcoming elections in 2024, it could be the next cycle. Our democracy is fragile right now, what we know of it. And it was never perfect to begin with. But whether it can survive and continue is absolutely fragile. And I'll give you my hot take as well on the recent Supreme Court decisions. They are inflaming our cultural tensions and creating more division and pushing us more towards a time when this nation might have to decide how united we are and how united we are committed to being. I mentioned in last week's service, there's a concerted move of folks who identify as trans and their families from states that are hostile to states that are less hostile or more friendly. Think of that happening across a spectrum of needs: reproductive choice, LGBT rights, other issues as well. The redder states want to become redder. Do you think they're cheering this on? Go ahead and move, leave our state if you don't agree with what we're saying or doing here. The redder states are becoming redder. This is a recipe for dissolution. We're not actually understanding one another, talking to one another, open to each other's differences. We're driving each other away. Can this country continue to survive as it has existed? As that trend just deepens, I leave that for your reflection. Now, the last question is, should we be preparing an underground? Well, I think I've said this with regards to the climate question from a moment ago. I mean, it dawned on me about 2 years ago that our governmental structures are absolutely not doing any sufficient work on climate change. So we've had to kind of figure out for our own home, how are we climate-proofing our own home? How are we improving, managing the trees on our property so trees aren't falling through the roof? How are we what are we going to do in the face of the increasing likelihood of power outages and electricity failure? We've had to manage all of that on our own as a family. I'm sure many of you are needing to make similar decisions yourself as families. Whether consciously or not, this is actually what is going on, is like, we're preparing ourselves for the trajectory we're on. This is another layer of that yes, we're on a certain political trajectory. You know, when I was a teen and a teenager and a kid, I believed so deeply in this nation. My first career was as a government civil servant, as a public servant. I believed so deeply in this nation. Do I want to see the United States fail as a political experiment? No. But it's likewise true that it never worked for everybody. And it's sure as heck not working now for a lot of people, a lot of people. You know, I don't tell others that they need to prep their house for climate change, but, you know, it's probably wise if you are. In a similar way, it's probably wise to be thinking about what would 10, 20 years look like from now if politically the United States isn't able to survive. I don't know the answer to that, but I am thinking about it as deeply as some of you are. All right, I'm going to try one more. I hope it's not as complex as these others. Let it be an easy one. Oh, okay, this isn't bad. Because it's connected directly to everything else we've been talking about. And it's a simple question. How do we fight? I love the simplicity of that question. Okay, so implied in that simplicity is that human conflict occurs. This may not be where the question was leading us, but this is how I'm interpreting it. So implied in that is human conflict is going to occur. So we are going to get crosswise with each other. We're going to, even in the best marriage, my spouse and I occasionally have a little argument about something. But here's and that's a great example. Okay, so think of somebody who you really care about. A best friend, a longtime friend of 20, 30, 40 years, whatever it might be, a spouse, a healthy spousal relationship. I have to qualify that. Think of whatever that template is for you. How have you navigated conflict? How have you fought productively? Actually, I don't like the word fight. It's actually constructive and productive management of conflict is what we mean by using the shorthand fight. Because fighting is a choice. We can metaphorically fight with metaphoric fists, even if we're not using fists. And I don't think it's necessary. Fights are never necessary. I think we can engage in productive conflict, and that involves not trying to change the other, which I've shared, and in not trying to change the other, to hear and listen deeply to what their need and experience is. Why is it leading them to the particular thing that they're at? Then sharing with equal honesty and courage our experience. Hey, they may have overlooked something that they care about, the person that we're having a conflict with. Maybe they didn't intend to hurt us. Maybe upon hearing our experience, they might be touched or changed in some way. Or even if it's as simple as understanding, I need a different communication style with this individual, because for this individual, my usual style of communicating isn't going to work. They're not receiving me in the way I'm intending or hoping. We can do that as an act of caring and love, to take a certain communication strategy with one person and a different communication strategy with another person. Of course we can do that. And in fact, we do that routinely from a place of love and caring. So great questions all around. Thank you everybody for such a thoughtful Sunday morning. I am always humbled and grateful. Thank you. And as I've shared, all of your questions will be read and included in our future service planning process.
I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and turn to number 318 in the gray hymnal, We Would Be One. Let us join together in singing number 318.
As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
Dear ones, head out into this new week holding in your hearts the commitments of what it means to be Unitarian Universalist, our commitment to one another in community, our commitment to our own growth and the growth of our culture, of our society, of our species, that calling to embody and live into the spirit of love and dignity and justice ever more deeply with each of our days. Know that you are supported in that longing, in that calling, in all that you strive to do in the days ahead by this community and by me personally as well. Go in love and go in the spirit of peace until we are together again. May it be so.